The unemployment rate is expected to skyrocket. Let's have a look. Hello everyone, Florian.Heise here, and welcome to another episode of HeiseSays. I have my morning coffee. I'm still working through. Those steins are good. They last a long time. I thought we'd look at this ABC News article discussing the, expected economic data that is coming out this month. And one that is of great concern is, unemployment. If we jump over here to Trading Economics, they have an economic calendar, and this is a fantastic website just to see what's appearing in the next week. We can see here tomorrow on Tuesday, we've got the RBA meeting minutes coming out. We've got the house price index for year on year and quarter on quarter. And what you can see here, they've got the previous data, what the consensus is, the expectation, and what the forecast is, usually the TE forecast. And what's interesting is the difference between the forecast and the actual data. If the actual is much better or much worse, even if the news is bad, that will have an impact on the market. It's interesting to watch. We've got new home sales month on month, the Westpac leading index month on month. Then we have employment change in May. Now previously it was 594,000 negative. The consensus is negative 125. The forecast from Trading Economics is negative 200,000. We've got full-time employment change. Previously was 220, and the forecast is 80,000. The unemployment is expected, or is now sitting at 6.2. I'll bring that up. I'll bring that up here, and you can see how it's shot up. The forecast is 6.9. You've got the participation rate. They're expecting that to go slightly up, 63.6. The consensus is 63.7. And then part-time employment, they're expecting a $120,000 drop. Now this is based on the ABS data. You've got to remember, we also have Roy Morgan, and there's a difference. We'll look at Roy Morgan. Their unemployment rate, scrolling right down to the bottom, is 14.8%. The combined unemployment and underemployment rate is at 24.5. That is the figure that should be in the news, the combined underemployment and unemployment rate, because that's going to have an effect on everyone's livelihood. So let's have a look at this article discussing this economic data that's coming out and what concerns business reporter Gareth Hitchens is suggesting. So, in mid-2000, the Reserve Bank held a two-day conference in Sydney to talk about the economic developments of the 90s. It wanted to know in what ways was the decade different from its predecessors, what were its successes and failures, and why did they occur. It published the conference papers afterwards. In the introduction to the papers, written by David Gruen, who is now head of the Bureau of Statistics, Dr. Gruen said the dictum that a week is a long time in politics surely did not apply to economics. The significance of economic events often remain opaque at the time, and the process of separating the importance from the ephemeral requires a period more like a decade than a week, he wrote. It was a wonderful observation. In your typical business cycle, when the pace of commercial activity is unhurried and life shuffles past at a low interest rate, 1 year can be hard to distinguish from the next. But it's different in a crisis. Remember March? Remember every week in March felt interminable. A week became a very long time as we struggled to understand the daily bulletins of the pandemic news and adjust to the reality of the lockdown, and as hundreds of thousands of workers lost their jobs overnight while others began working from home. A few months later, and we're hyper aware that each major piece of new economic data is more significant than it typically would be. And that's you can see that in the share market, in the movements there. It's just crazy at the moment. However, Dr. Gruen's deep point still stands. It may take economists a decade before they appreciate how significant every bit of data has been this year. But by then the Reserve Bank will be ready to hold a futures conference on the Australian economy in the 2020. Yeah. So labour force data is expected to show further deterioration. Having said that, there will be important data released this week. The focus of economists will be in the May labour force figures. To come on Thursday, they're expected to show a further deterioration in the labour market. Australia's official unemployment rate has risen this year from 5.1% in Feb to 5.2 in March and 6.2 in April. Economists think it will jump again in May to 7.5% or higher. Commonwealth Bank senior economist Belinda Allen estimates 100,000 people lost their job last month after a staggering 594,000 jobs lost in April. She thinks the unemployment rate will jump to 7.7%. Now remember that. Remember, Roy Morgan is saying it's already at 14.8%. It's to do with the methodology that Roy Morgan approaches to their surveying compared to the ABS. 1 hour a week isn't employment. Can they change it? Can they change their methodology to be more realistic? We need to have two figures. We need to have, 1 hour a week, that's underemployment, isn't it? We need to have the combined underemployment and unemployment data. Because it's just nuts, guys. It really is. So, better than expected US payrolls data out last week shows the challenge of forecasting in such unprecedented times, especially as economies reopen, Miss Allen wrote in a note to clients. Yeah, but that US payrolls data, the unemployment data, everything coming out of the US statistically is just, it's really questionable about some of the methodology they used and how the figures look to have been manipulated. But we expect a further deterioration in the labour market in Australia in May. Ms. Allen says part of the reason why the official unemployment rate will rise to 7.7% will be technical. Part of it will be driven by a lift in the participation rate from 63.5% to 64%, she says. While with the virus under better control and more parts of the economy reopening, we do believe more people will re-enter the labour force and look for work. This is the thing. You're in the labour force, you're participating if you're looking for work. So if you're not, so all those people on JobKeeper, technically, I mean, they're considered employed, but they're not looking for work, and if they're not working. Payroll and wage data reveal the state of the economy during the pandemic. On Tuesday, the Bureau of Statistics will release its weekly payroll jobs and wage data for the week ending May 30. This experimental data, which is based on the tax office's single-touch payroll system, has been introduced by Dr. Kucoin to help economists better understand what's happening in the Australian economy during the pandemic lockdown. And that's a fantastic move. We're getting closer to real-time data, real-time economic data, which we should have access to, everyone. So long as it's publicly made available, I think that's smart, so we can make more sensible decisions. It will count the number of jobs in the economy, not the number of employed. In Australia, the number of people with more than one job is roughly 6%. Also, on Tuesday, the ABS will release its residential property price indexes for Australia's 8 capital cities based on March quarter data. See, there you go. I mean, how old is that data? The data will show what's happening to property prices over the summer as the bushfires devastated so many coastal communities. Reserve Board minutes to provide clarity during the downturn. On Tuesday, the minutes of the Reserve Board's meeting from earlier this month will also be released. And interestingly, the RBA Governor, Philip Lowe, has allowed some optimism to creep into his tone in recent weeks, saying it is possible that the depth of the downturn will be less than expected. The minutes will hopefully provide more context for his optimism. We'll have to go through those, guys. Ms. Allen says bond markets will also be looking for news about the RBA's bond buying program. Any discussion around the RBA's balance sheet and quantitative easing program will be watched, with no bond purchases conducted since May 6, despite some slight uptick in both 3-year and 10-year Australian Commonwealth security yields, she said. So the Australian dollar to keep strengthening. Westpac's economics team has been keenly watching the performance of Australia's dollar recently. The dollar has been on a tear, jumping from its lowest level in nearly 2 decades of 55.1 US cents in mid-March to break above 70 cents this month, an increase of 27%. The dollar has risen so quickly largely because China's economy has started waking from its pandemic coma. So it's hungry for Australia's mineral resources, particularly iron ore, has returned with gusto. And here you have it, guys. The Australian dollar is simply a proxy for the Chinese economy. That's what everyone's saying. Iron ore prices have been soaring due to the increased demand from China and severe supply disruptions in Brazil, which is one of the world's major iron ore suppliers. Well, they're the second one, we're the top. Until recently, Westpac's team was forecasting the dollar would end the year worth 68 cents, but it's officially changed that forecast last week to 72 cents. It also thinks the dollar will end 2021 worth 76 US cents, as global growth turns around sharply next year from -3% to +5%, with China recording 10% growth, so watch this space. So there you go, guys. Predictions of, well, an increase to unemployment, and this payroll data we'll really have to look at. That's going to give us a real indication of what's going on in the economy, where it's all heading. And some interesting predictions for the Australian dollar to shoot up and the US dollar essentially to lose its value. How will that affect our property? How will that affect tourism? How will that affect international students attending Australia if the dollar's more expensive? I remember at university I was told by staff that Australia in some ways is the poor man's United States. You can learn English, similar culture, education, similar quality, although I'd say it's gone down, but not as prestigious. Not as prestigious. Anyway, let me know your thoughts and opinions. What economic data are you interested in seeing? What would you like me to talk about over the next week or month? Take care, everyone. Have a great day. If you want to support the channel, there are a few ways you can. You can join the channel on YouTube or Patreon. You can support us via our affiliate links at Amazon or eBay or Independent Reserve and Kucoin. You can buy our merch from HeiseSays Pocket Squares, handmade in this very house. You can see them behind me. You can use Gold Pass from the Perth Mint or support us via PayPal. Take care. I'll see you next time.